Have you ever had a moment so strange, so perfectly timed, that it made you stop and wonder, was that really just a coincidence? You think of an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and seconds later, your phone lights up with their message. You hum a random song in the morning, only to hear it blasting from a car that drives past in the afternoon. Or maybe, just maybe, you've experienced something even more bizarre, something so precise, so eerily connected, that the very fabric of reality seemed to be winking at you. Welcome to Synchronicity Signals, where we explore coincidences that aren't coincidences, diving deep into the mysterious connections that weave through our everyday lives. These moments aren't just accidents. Some believe they're messages, guiding us along an unseen path. Others insist it's nothing more than probability playing tricks on our perception. But what if the truth is stranger than either explanation? What if reality itself is structured in a way that deliberately aligns events in ways we are only beginning to understand? Carl Jung thought so. The legendary Swiss psychiatrist was the first to give a name to this bizarre phenomenon, synchronicity, a concept so radical that it shattered the rigid walls between psychology, science, and the unexplained. Jung saw the world as more than a random, chaotic mess of events. He believed there was an underlying order, a hidden network of meaning that connected people, events, and ideas across time and space. But was he right? And if so, what does that mean for us? Imagine for a moment that your thoughts, your emotions, even your unspoken desires could somehow shape the world around you. That the universe, or something within it, reacts to your consciousness in ways far beyond chance. That coincidences are actually breadcrumbs leading you toward something bigger. Before you dismiss it, consider this. Some of the greatest minds in history have encountered synchronicity in ways so profound, so impossible to ignore, that they spent their lives trying to understand it. Some saw it as evidence of a deeper connection between all things. Others saw it as a warning that we might not be as in control of our lives as we think. And yet, the more we try to explain synchronicity, the deeper the mystery becomes. Scientists, mathematicians, even quantum physicists have tried to break it down into formulas, probabilities, and neurological patterns. But every explanation seems to raise more questions than answers. And that's where we begin. Because by the time we reach the end of this journey, you may start to see the world differently. You may begin to notice the hidden patterns in your own life, connections you once dismissed as random. And once you see them, you can never unsee them. The birth of synchronicity, it started with a scarab beetle. Carl Jung sat across from his patient, a woman whose rigid, analytical mind made progress in therapy almost impossible. She was trapped in a world of logic, dismissing anything that couldn't be neatly explained. But then, she described a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. As she spoke, a tapping noise came from the window behind Jung. He turned to see a large insect trying to get in. He opened the window, reached out, and caught it. In his hand was a scarabaeid beetle, the closest thing to the golden scarab from her dream. Jung handed it to her and simply said, "Here's your scarab." The moment shattered something in her. The walls of her rigid mind cracked, and she finally opened up to change. That was the first time Jung realized that coincidences weren't always just coincidences. They had meaning. They had weight. This was the birth of synchronicity, the idea that events can be connected, not by cause and effect, but by meaning. That reality itself might arrange certain events together in ways we don't yet understand. But why? To answer that, we have to dive into the battle between two forces, science and mystery. The science of coincidences, statisticians will tell you that nothing here is special. They'll say your mind is wired to seek patterns. That randomness has to create order once in a while. With billions of people making billions of decisions every day, improbable things must happen. Because mathematically, everything that can happen eventually will. Sounds reasonable, right? until you experience it for yourself, until you think of someone right before they call, until you dream of a number and wake up to find it printed on a receipt in your pocket, until you pick up a book in a random shop and find a passage that answers the exact question you've been struggling with for weeks. Psychologists claim it's all about confirmation bias, the tendency to notice things that fit a pattern and ignore the countless other things that don't. And yet, there are cases so precise, so impossible to ignore, that no statistical explanation feels satisfying. Even scientists studying probability admit there's something unsettling about it. Dr. John Littlewood, a mathematician from Cambridge, proposed Littlewood's law, which suggests that if you're awake for 8 hours a day and experience one notable event per second, you'll witness a miracle roughly once every 35 days. A miracle every month. And yet, some people experience synchronicity almost daily. So the question remains, are these moments just mathematical inevitabilities? Or are they signs of something more real? Life cases that defy logic. Coincidences happen every day. But then there are those moments, so precise, so impossibly aligned, that they shake the foundation of everything we think we know. These aren't just stories. These are anomalies, glitches in reality that demand an explanation. Historical coincidences that will blow your mind. Let's start with one of the most famous and disturbing synchronicities in history. The eerie parallels between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Kennedy, exactly 100 years later, in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Kennedy, again, 100 years later, in 1960. Both were deeply involved in civil rights struggles during their presidencies. Both were assassinated on a Friday, shot in the head. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater. Kennedy was shot in a car, a Lincoln, made by Ford. Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was born in 1839. Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, born in 1939. Booth ran from a theater to a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse to a theater. Coincidence? Maybe. But the precision of it makes you wonder, was history somehow pre-written? A script playing out in patterns that repeat century after century. And this isn't the only example. Consider the Titanic. You know the story, unsinkable ship, iceberg, disaster. But did you know that 14 years before the Titanic sank, someone wrote a novel predicting it? In 1898, author Morgan Robertson wrote Futility, The Wreck of the Titan, a novel about a massive luxury ship, unsinkable, that strikes an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks. Sound familiar? It should, because the ship in the novel was called the Titan. And the details, uncanny. The Titan was 800 feet long. The Titanic, 882 feet. Both ships carried too few lifeboats. Both disasters happened in April. And both sank about 400 miles off Newfoundland. Robertson swore it wasn't a prediction, just a story. But how do we explain something like this? Was it pure accident? Or was he somehow tapping into something else? A hidden structure to time? A glimpse into an event that was destined to happen? Personal stories of synchronicity. These bizarre coincidences don't just happen in history books. They happen to people. Every day. Maybe even you. Ever heard of the 11 phenomenon? People across the world report repeatedly seeing the numbers 11, 1, 1 on clocks, receipts, license plates. Some believe it's a sign, a cosmic nudge, a wake-up call from the universe. Others think it's linked to a shift in consciousness, as if reality itself is trying to make them aware of something. Then there are the stories that defy all logic, like the one of a man in the UK who got a call from his mom while he was driving. His Bluetooth malfunctioned, And instead of hearing her voice, the car stereo started playing a voicemail she had left him years ago, on the day she died. Or the woman who had a sudden, powerful thought about her childhood home, one she hadn't seen in decades. That same day, while walking in a city halfway across the country, she turned a corner and came face to face with a mural of her childhood home, painted on the side of a random building. Some might say these are just coincidences. But ask yourself, if this happened to you, would you believe that? At what point does just coincidence stop being an explanation? At what point do we have to admit that something deeper is happening? Something we don't yet understand. And if that's true, what does that mean for us? What else might be connected, just beyond the edges of our perception? Theories behind synchronicity at this point. The question isn't if synchronicity is real. Too many people have experienced it. The question is why. Why does reality sometimes bend in ways that feel so impossibly precise? What force is orchestrating these moments? There are theories, some grounded in science, some mystical, some so mind-bending they challenge everything we believe about time, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. Is it just probability? Skeptics have one word for all of this: chance. They say synchronicity is just a numbers game, that with billions of people making billions of choices every second, some of those choices will accidentally align in ways that feel meaningful. Take the birthday paradox. The idea that in a room of just 23 people, there's a 50% chance that 2 of them share the same birthday. That sounds impossible at first, but mathematically, it's just how probability works. Could synchronicity be the same, just randomness, misunderstood? If that were true, we should expect coincidences to be evenly distributed. But that's not what we see. Some people experience them constantly, as if they've unlocked a hidden frequency of reality, while others hardly notice them at all. And then there's something else: the timing of synchronicities. They don't just happen randomly. They seem to appear at pivotal moments, when we're struggling with a big decision, when we feel lost, when we need guidance, as if they're responding to something deeper than probability, as if they're trying to tell us something. Which brings us to the next theory. The quantum connection. Here's where things get strange. Quantum physics has already proven that the act of observing something changes its behavior. It's called the observer effect, and it means that consciousness itself may be influencing the physical world. If that's true, then what happens when millions of people focus on the same thing? Could their collective consciousness be bending reality in subtle ways, creating coincidences that aren't really coincidences at all? There's an experiment that hints at this. It's called the Global Consciousness Project, a network of random number generators placed all over the world. These machines produce completely random sequences of numbers. But something bizarre happens during global events. The numbers become less random. This was recorded on September 11th, 2001, hours before the attacks on the World Trade Center. The randomness in the machines dropped, almost like the world knew something was coming. If human consciousness can affect reality, if our thoughts, emotions, and focus can shape the external world, then synchronicity might not be random at all. It might be us. A spiritual perspective, but what if it's not just science? What if synchronicity is something older, something spiritual? Ancient traditions across the world have always believed in signs, messages from the universe, from fate, from unseen forces guiding us. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it's called karma, the idea that everything is connected, that past actions ripple through time, shaping the present in ways we might not immediately understand. In Western mysticism, it's called divine intervention, the belief that coincidences are actually orchestrated moments, placed in our lives for a reason. And in the modern world, many believe in the law of attraction, the idea that what we think, we attract. That the universe responds to our focus, bringing more of what we dwell on into our lives. But here's the twist. These theories all overlap. Quantum physics suggests that observation shapes reality. Spiritual traditions suggest that intention shapes destiny. And synchronicity, it sits right in the middle, a phenomenon that seems to merge science and spirituality in ways we don't yet fully understand. So, if synchronicity is real, if it's a message, if it's something we can actually harness, then how do we do it? What if we could recognize these moments more clearly? What if we could actually create synchronicity instead of just waiting for it to happen? Because that's exactly what we're about to explore next. How to recognize and interpret synchronicities. Imagine this. You wake up with a weird, nagging feeling that you should call an old friend. You ignore it. Later that day, you see their name on a billboard. You brush it off. Then, you overhear two strangers in a cafe saying that exact friend's name. The next day, they message you out of the blue. Is that just coincidence? Or was the universe screaming at you to pay attention? Synchronicity is happening all the time, but most people miss it. Why? Because we're trained to dismiss anything that doesn't fit into the neat little box of logic and predictability. But if you know what to look for, the signs are everywhere. Signs that go beyond randomness. Not every coincidence is synchronicity. So how do you tell the difference? Repetition. If something keeps showing up, numbers, names, symbols, pay attention. One coincidence, maybe random. But if the same thing pops up again and again, that's something else. Timing. Synchronicities tend to happen at moments when you're at a crossroads. When you're unsure. When you're asking the universe for a sign, even if you don't realize you are. Emotional impact. Ever had a coincidence that felt different? Not just interesting, but deeply personal. That's another clue. Synchronicities aren't just about patterns. They hit you in the gut, like a knowing. Unlikelihood. The more improbable an event is, the harder it is to brush off. Thinking of someone right before they text you is one thing. Meeting a stranger in a foreign country who happens to be your childhood neighbor, that's something else. The problem is, we've been conditioned to ignore these moments. We dismiss them because they don't fit into a logical framework. But logic is limited. And synchronicity, it doesn't care about logic. The role of intuition here is something no one tells you. Synchronicity and intuition are deeply connected. Ever had a gut feeling that made no sense, but turned out to be right? That's because intuition isn't random. It's your subconscious mind picking up on patterns before your conscious mind catches on. And the more you listen to it, the stronger it gets. That's why people who meditate, who practice mindfulness, who quiet the noise in their minds, tend to experience synchronicity more often. They're tuned in. They're noticing the patterns that others overlook. And the more you notice, the more it happens. Because here's the strangest part, synchronicity isn't just something you experience. It's something you can create. Think about it. If your thoughts and focus play a role in shaping reality, then what happens when you start consciously looking for patterns? What happens when you expect synchronicity? Reality starts to respond. And that's where things get really interesting. Because if synchronicity is more than just chance, if it's something you can actually use, then what's stopping you from making it happen on demand? That's exactly what we're about to uncover next. Can we create more synchronicities? What if synchronicity isn't just something that happens to you? What if you could actually make it happen on purpose? Some people seem to experience these eerie, meaningful coincidences all the time. Others, almost never. So what's the difference? Is it luck? Some kind of hidden cosmic algorithm? Or is it something we're doing without even realizing it? The truth is, you can actually attract synchronicity into your life. And no, this isn't about magical thinking or wishful daydreaming. It's about understanding how your mind interacts with reality itself. The power of intention. Ever noticed how when you start thinking about something, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere? You hear a word you've never heard before. Now it's in every conversation. You start researching a new car. Suddenly, they're everywhere on the road. That's not magic. That's your reticular activating system, RAS, a part of your brain designed to filter information and focus on what matters to you. Here's the kicker: you can program it. When you set an intention, when you actively focus on a thought, idea, or goal, your brain starts filtering reality to match it. You begin to notice opportunities, connections, and coincidences that you would have ignored before. It feels like the universe is aligning things for you, when in reality, you are aligning yourself with the universe. This is why people who expect synchronicity experience it more often. They're not creating luck. They're simply becoming more attuned to the patterns that were already there. But what if it's more than just psychology? Scientific experiments on mind and matter. Let's talk about something that sounds impossible. Scientists who have measured the impact of human consciousness on physical reality. One of the most famous experiments comes from the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research (PEAR) lab. Scientists asked participants to try influencing a random number generator just by thinking about it. And somehow, they did. Over time, their thoughts actually shifted the randomness, as if human consciousness was bending reality at a microscopic level. Now, take that idea and scale it up. If thoughts can nudge probability, even slightly, what happens when millions of people focus on the same idea? Remember the Global Consciousness Project, the one where random number generators became less random before 9/11, as if human consciousness had somehow sensed what was coming. This isn't just theory anymore. It's measurable. Your thoughts aren't just floating around in your head. They're interacting with reality in ways science is only beginning to understand. So if your thoughts, your focus, and your intention shape your experience of reality, then is it really that crazy to believe that synchronicity is something you can generate? Experimenting with reality. Here's a challenge. For the next 48 hours, decide that you're going to experience a synchronicity. Be specific. Choose something, an image, a word, an animal, a song. Then, watch. The more you expect it, the more it will appear. And when it does, ask yourself, was it always there and you just weren't noticing? Or did you, in some way, pull it into reality? Because if you can do it once, you can do it again and again. And that raises an even bigger question. If synchronicities aren't random, then what else in your life isn't random either? What if the patterns go deeper than just coincidence? What if your entire reality is being shaped, right now, by forces you've barely begun to understand? That's where we're going next. Because the implications of this are bigger than you think. Conclusion: what does this mean for you? So here we are. We've unraveled the mystery of synchronicity, dug into its origins, questioned whether it's just probability, explored the eerie real world cases, and even experimented with reality itself. But now comes the real question. What does this mean for you? Because if synchronicity is real, if reality isn't just random, if your thoughts and consciousness are influencing the events around you, then nothing about your life is accidental. That moment you almost made a different choice, that stranger you randomly met, that book that fell off a shelf at the exact moment you needed its message. What if those weren't just accidents? What if reality is always speaking to you through symbols, signs, and impossible timing? Maybe you felt it before. A sense that something was guiding you, nudging you toward the right path. Maybe you've ignored it, dismissed it as nothing. But now, you know better. Now, you know that synchronicity is real. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You might start noticing the patterns more, the timing of events, the strange alignments that don't seem like they should happen, but do. And the more you pay attention, the more they will appear. Because that's the final secret about synchronicity. It's interactive. The more you believe in it, the more it shows up. The more you expect it, the stronger it gets. Reality isn't just something you experience. It's something you're part of. So what if you leaned into that? What if, instead of dismissing these moments, you followed them? Because if synchronicity is a message, then the real question is, are you listening? Let us know. Have you ever experienced synchronicity? A coincidence too perfect to ignore? Drop your story in the comments. Because trust me, you're not alone. And if you want to dive deeper, if you want to start experiencing synchronicity on purpose, then keep watching. Because once you open this door, reality will never look the same again.